Jake Wallace-Simons is the author of Never Again, How the West Betrayed Jews and Itself, and joins us once again to talk about, well, all things at home and abroad in relation to Gaza. A very good afternoon to you, Jake.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. There's a lot I want to talk to you about. Can we talk first of all about this Oxford student, this delightful soul, Samuel Williams? We discovered yesterday, I was delighted on air to learn that he had been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. I and many others have said, hey, let's make this guy famous after his horrific chants of, you know, Gaza, Gaza, do us proud, put the Zios in the ground. Apparently he'd been workshopping it at Oxford. We discovered he was at Balliol College, Oxford University, studying PPE. I mean, I'm ashamed and embarrassed that this Egypt got a place at university with such stupid views. But he's now been questioned by the police. He's been suspended by the university. Should that have happened?
Well, I think that sadly his radical views probably helped him get a place at Oxford, because there's quite a lot of radicalism there. He's not actually that unusual at Oxford, and indeed at other universities up and down the country which have been taken over by radical views increasingly since you and I were there some years ago. And, you know, it strikes me that really something needs to be done before this gets worse. It's pretty bad right now. Students are flying Palestinian flags, waving kafirs around, refusing to go to lessons, disrupting graduation ceremonies and all the rest of it. And the authorities are just sitting back and letting them get on with it. And I think that universities should be depoliticised. There should be a zero-tolerance attitude towards this stuff. Do any of that, and you'll be sent down, rusticated, expelled, and you'll lose your tuition fees. I mean, that's the only way forward.
I mean, again, certainly in the case of what he was saying, you know, put the Zios in the ground, he's not just talking about Jews. Yeah, it's code for Jews. That's what it means. Who are we kidding? Zionists, but, you know, including people like me, you know, who support the rights of Israel to exist. He wants to bury me, presumably after I'm dead. I mean, this is the thing. It's not a freedom of speech issue, is it? This is very much about, you know, you don't have a right to call for people to die, you know, but you can express your views without being threatening to other people. And bearing in mind this was at a protest for the Palestinian people, apparently, after a ceasefire was called. So not quite sure what they were protesting at that point. But here's the thing, is he part of the problem? Is he just a symptom of this? Because this has been allowed to explode on our campuses, same as in America as well, and particularly on elite university campuses. And it's almost been considered sort of acceptable in a way that you can intimidate Jewish students and students who support the right of Israel. But if you misgendered someone who claimed to be trans, you'd be out on your ear. We've literally spoken to people, guests on the show, who've lost their university places because they've done that. This sort of, again, two-tier justice within universities.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear that when he said Gaza, Gaza, make us proud, he wasn't talking about Gaza as a whole. He was talking about Hamas. Yeah. Because the only people likely to put any Israeli soldiers in the ground is Hamas, not the civilians of Gaza. So he's saying, and the civilians of Gaza, as we know, are being murdered, tortured, abused, oppressed by Hamas now, as we speak, as they have been for many, many years. So he is clearly aligning himself with Hamas, which is a criminal offence in Britain, supporting a proscribed terrorist group. And the reason why this sort of thing keeps happening is because the universities have not drawn a line and said no. They need to be saying, thus far and no further. You're not allowed to behave like this. It's not a free speech issue. It wouldn't be a free speech infringement for universities to say that one of the conditions of being a student here is that you don't disrupt lessons, disrupt classes, disrupt the running of the institutions, and you don't bring us into disrepute. That's not a free speech issue. That's perfect common sense. But the fact that the authorities have not stopped this has emboldened these young communists and allowed them to run riot, ruining the experience for everyone else, intimidating Jewish students, and bringing their views into the mainstream with impunity. I think it's got to stop. Yeah,
absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that. What also has to stop, I think, is the BBC and many others. Blatant, I mean, they call it disinformation, misinformation, blatant lies, deliberately misleading their viewers. And we see it, I mean, on social media, the lies just absolutely been spreading like poison about what's happened in Gaza in the last week or so with the ceasefire and the exchange of, in some cases reported by the BBC, exchange of hostages, claiming somehow that the people who've been held underground in tunnels, starved and tortured for the last 2 years are the same as someone who has been convicted in an open court of a terror attack, killing people, and is held as a Palestinian in an Israeli jail. And then somehow there's a moral equivalence. But some of their coverage has really gone beyond the pale, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's inaccurate and unprofessional to draw an equivalence between the Israeli innocent hostages and Palestinian hardened prisoners who've been imprisoned for life sentences because they've masterminded suicide attacks. Those two things are not the same. Now, when you go to the Palestinian street and you see scenes of jubilation welcoming these murderers back onto their streets, the BBC says, look, to Palestinians, they're heroes, and to the Israelis, they're terrorists. Who knows what's the truth? Well, the BBC should know what the truth is, because it's doing the audience a disservice by not saying that these Palestinians are celebrating jihadi murderers. That's the truth. And they're not the same as innocent Israeli hostages who've been kidnapped against their will, held underground as bargaining chips. The two things are not the same, and it's only professional to give the truth to audiences, not a kind of mealy-mouthed, both sides of the mouth kind of liberalism, which doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Well, indeed, there's one particular bit of coverage, and very sympathetic sort of, this crying sister of one Palestinian prisoner who'd been released, and how wonderful it was to have him home, but they'd been separated from him for, so many years. Completely easy mistake to make, forgetting to mention that the brother she was crying for was Murad Abu He was serving 4 life sentences for his role in a suicide bombing that killed people. I mean,
that's right. Yeah, I mean, it was
stuff.
Exactly. It's a suicide bomb that killed 4 people in 2006 in Kedumim. And I just wonder, if you had lost a relative in that suicide attack and you saw the BBC's coverage of this man being released, with his sister anguished, talking about how awful it's going to be, she doesn't know what size clothes to buy him, he hasn't seen him for so long. If you were a relative who'd lost a father, a mother, a brother, a sister in that attack, how would you feel at BBC's coverage of that?
Exactly. I mean, also there was one man that pictured who was a double amputee. And people go, it's a double, this terrible, this poor victim. He's a double amputee because he was a suicide bomber, blew off his own legs. And why was he still alive? Oh, because he'd been saved by Israeli medics. I mean, this is the extraordinary thing.
Exactly. I think we need to call it what it is, which is propaganda, I'm afraid. And not just propaganda, but also incitement, because the more the BBC, other media outlets portray Israel as the demonic bad force in the world, the more violence against Jews is likely to happen in Britain, because that's what it is. It's incitement to violence.
Well, indeed. I mean, just before we go to actually what has been happening, and there has been a lot of violence in Gaza since, Keir Starmer has been speaking at the Community Security Trust, and this is the body that had to be set up to keep Jewish people safe, to protect synagogues, Jewish schools. It's quite extraordinary that body has to exist. And yes, I know that there has to be bodies to protect Muslims and mosques as well. But it's absolutely appalling that both should ever need security in this country. I'm ashamed that is the case. But Keir Starmer asked the government's independent anti-Semitism advisor, that's Lord Mann, to conduct a review of the NHS, as we've seen some extraordinary examples of doctors, one of whom I've invited on the show, but for some reason just chooses not to come. Even though she said she was horrified that she was banned, she wasn't able to come on shows like mine. Well, come on then. You've had the invitation. I've DM'd you. But basically, some real concern about a number of doctors speaking publicly on social media, in public forums, saying, not discussing their support for the Palestinian state or their anger with Netanyahu as a foreign leader of a foreign government, but blatantly open, horrific anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I mean, that doctor in particular that you were talking about was tweeting a lot about Jewish supremacy and its reach into government and the NHS. I mean, this is clearly old-fashioned anti-Semitism that we've experienced for hundreds of years and had echoes in the Third Reich, frankly. It was that sort of Hitler-level anti-Semitism that she was spreading. And to think that these people are doctors, and if you're a Jewish patient, or actually any patient,
I don't want to be treated by her.
Exactly, to be cared for, as it were, by somebody who I think she's mentally ill. I think she is mentally ill. I think people like her are mentally ill. I mean, I know anti-Semitism is a sort of mind virus, but it does seem that some of these people are just unhinged. The level of vitriol and hatred, and the fact that they feel that the world should be listening to them. The world's got it wrong. The world should be more hateful towards Jews. That's where we're going wrong here.
Well, you and I are being paid our 7,000. I've yet to work it out. I keep asking people. My accountant keeps asking, is it 7,000 shekels, $7,000 or 7,000 pounds that we get paid every time we shill, apparently, for Israel? I mean, that's what these people seem to genuinely believe this stuff. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, they do. I mean, in the old days,
I'd be at work anymore? I'd be a billionaire by now. I wouldn't be at work. I'd be eating chocolate on the beach.
Yeah. I mean, in medieval times, they believed that Jews had horns and a tail. In the Second World War, they believed that Jews pulled the strings of the money markets and all the rest of it. And now they believe this. It's just the same sort of stuff coming back to us. And the real problem is that the NHS isn't taking strong enough action against these people. There have been a few cases where they've been brought to a tribunal and actually acquitted, allowed to practice again, which just encourages them and emboldens other people to go public with their anti-Semitic bile. And these are doctors. It's making people not just feel unsafe, it's making people unsafe, actually unsafe in the NHS.
I've seen a lot of messages from people saying as Jews they've actually hidden that they were Jewish in hospital because they were so fearful. That, again, just totally unacceptable, like what's happening on our campuses. Let's talk about what is happening in Gaza right now, because a lot of people hating the ceasefire, a lot of people saying that Donald Trump may have sort of, gone a little bit too big with his early with his celebrations. But we did see the return of those 20 live hostages. We have now seen, well, some of those murdered hostages' bodies returned, but it's not looking hopeful in the next few weeks of getting all of them back. But we have also seen horrific scenes played out quite deliberately in front of the cameras by Hamas terrorists of open executions, mass executions of people who they consider to be, well, should we say, problematic to Hamas remaining in power in Gaza. We have seen IDF soldiers warning and then shooting, people deliberately crossing the border into the territory that is IDF control. What hopes do you have now that there will actually be a ceasefire that continues, that the war is over, and that Hamas can ever be removed from Gaza?
Well, I mean, one of the extraordinary things about Hamas is that it never hides what it's like. It filmed October the 7th on GoPros. It's filming these executions and torture now, broadcasting them around the world totally shamelessly, and yet people in the West see that with their own eyes and think, they're just responding to Israeli oppression.
He said, she said.
They're not really that bad. They make excuses for Hamas that Hamas doesn't make for itself, And I think that in that context, the idea of peace somehow breaking out is quite distant, because Hamas clearly remains very much in control of Gaza, meting out its vengeance against rival clans and that sort of thing. And while Hamas remains armed and in control of Gaza, it also, I'm afraid to say, remains a threat to Israel in the longer term, because it's, again, been open about its desire to carry out October the 7th again and again and again. It's not joking about that. That's what it wants to do.
This is
and
the
until
thing.
Hamas is destroyed,
when Hamas tells us who they are and what they want to do, the West's apologists for Hamas choose to, no, they don't mean it really.
Exactly.
Of course, Israel and the people living on that border, they absolutely know they do mean it really, because they are still living and their loved ones have died as a result of that. But this is the thing, you know as well as I do that Hamas are going to deliberately provoke. IDF may or may not be sent back in, or I don't know what the Israelis would do in any other scenario. What else could you do? And then Israel will be blamed for being the aggressor once again, and many Western governments will also wag their little fingers. There isn't a single government in this world that would put up with having Hamas on their border saying that they wanted their destruction and that they do October the 7th again. Not a single government in the world. Why do people think that Israel should put up with that?
Exactly. I mean, the almost funny thing is really that Israel's blamed for everything. I mean, you even see Israel being blamed for Hamas's violence against Palestinians right now, by saying that Israel somehow created this division in Palestinian society or fomented it, is to blame for it. But the only thing Israel's to blame for is withdrawing from Gaza in 2005 and giving Palestinians charge of their own destiny, their own strip of land. And look where that got them. So Israel, people are going to blame Israel, whatever it does. And that's the conclusion that Israel has. I mean, people talk about Israel having poor PR. I think Israel's given up, frankly, because it knows that people are going to condemn them, whatever they do. So it's given up trying. It's just going to, fight to defend its citizens and do what it knows is right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter about PR war. It's winning the real war. Just finally, in terms of their own little wars, Greta Thunberg and her little Gaza flotilla, they've taken hostage apparently, and then they were released. Some people didn't get their medication, and we are told again. But the Swedish activist has now accused Israeli guards of not just defacing her suitcase with the words "whore Greta," drawings of a penis and images of the Star of David. She said she was hit, kicked, starved and tortured during her time in Israeli custody, which is a bit bizarre given that she didn't mention it when she was first free, when she was dancing around, arms up, and she looked remarkably well and bruise free for someone who had been beaten and tortured all that time.
Yeah, my favourite quote from her alleging this abuse was, "Then they ripped my frog hat off, threw it on the floor, stamped and kicked it."
I mean, if that isn't worse, a UN Security Council, a vote, I don't know what is. But the general thing is, what's interesting is actually, she said this, and you can actually feel that the world's media has gone, yeah, we don't believe you. She is absolutely, I mean, and there have been undercover videos on the flotilla of these people basically saying, we lie. This is what we do. We lie. I mean, no one believes a word this silly little woman who knows less about Gaza and the Middle East than she does about climate change, and she knows sod all about that. No one believes a word she says. I mean, they just undermine themselves, in which case they're doing our work for us, aren't they?
Well, sort of, but she's still getting the headlines, though, isn't she? I mean, this was the whole point of them going. It wasn't anything to do with delivering any food to anybody.
There was barely any food on the flotilla.
Yeah, I mean, Israel delivered 40 million meals in the period where the flotilla was at sea. They brought over a few cans of stuff that didn't get anywhere. It was ridiculous. It wasn't about that. It was about creating this kind of PR, as it were, for Hamas, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
They're acting as activists on behalf of Hamas, whose interests they are clearly serving. And they're willing to exaggerate, to lie, to create these dramas for that sake. And a lot of people do buy it. I mean, I know you're saying that the world's media didn't believe them, and you and I didn't. It's obviously a load of rubbish. But a lot of people do. People on social media, a lot of kids are influenced by this stuff. And it's quite pernicious, and it really is working astonishingly for the agenda of the jihadis who would kill them if they got half a chance.
Yeah, that's the irony, isn't it? Oh, we live in troubled times. Jake Wallace-Simons, it's always good to talk to you, try and make sense of some of it. Author of the brilliant book, Never Again, How the West Betrayed Jews and Itself. Former booker, Israelophobia as well. Also an absolutely brilliant read. Both of them, published great prescience ahead of these awful attacks in Manchester at the synagogue, but also ahead of October the 7th as well in 2023.